Hello everyone and welcome to another World of Warcraft video. And last time I spoke a bit about the lore behind the new expansion coming out, Warlords of Draenor, and today I thought I'd go over some of the features that I'm actually excited for that are coming out in the new expansion. There's obviously a hell of a lot of changes that are being made. Some of them are a bit controversial, some of them are just basic quality of life changes that are a bit hard to argue against. But there's a lot that's been obviously added in patch 6.0. And the first off, I want to talk about the actual setting of it. Now, obviously we've already been to the basic area this takes place, and that's Outland, the level 60 to 70 zone. So Draenor is Outland before it became Outland. Essentially, when Gul'dan, when Gul'dan made the Ner'zhul. I get confused between those two quite a lot. When Ner'zhul made the portal to try and find a new world for his hordes to conquer, the magic created from his portal actually shattered Draenor and turned it into the Outland that we know. We're going back before that portal was opened to Draenor as it was before it became Outland. So obviously a lot of the zones are very different. Sang'damash is covered in an ocean. Hellfire Peninsula is actually a jungle, I believe. Nagrand, I think, was relatively unchanged. I think it was one of the few places that managed to survive through the event of the portal. But most of it is pretty much entirely different. It's basically a world just like Azeroth, but they're saying it's a very savage world, and a world that the orcs are currently in this timeline trying to take over. And I think it's a great setting because I read the book Rise of the Horde, which this expansion takes place during in that timeline, and it's a great story. A lot of the characters are awesome, like Orgrim, Doomhammer and Durotan, and I've always kind of wished, I kind of wanted to see what they'd be like in game, maybe for a flashback cutscene or something. But the fact they're doing a whole expansion about it is a great idea to me. I'm super stoked about the storyline behind it, and the fact that it's relatable to current events as well, in terms of Grosh going back and us going in there, and how these characters would respond to current characters is really interesting to me. I want to see how Gromhellscream reacts to his son now that his son's grown up and become War Chief of the Horde. How's that going to work out, and how's Thrall going to react to meeting his father, because those two never met. So yeah, I'm well behind the storyline of it, even if I am a little bit disappointed that it's not the Dark Below, because I was quite interested by that, the whole Naga and Old Gods thing, but maybe one day. The level cap is being raised to 100. The reason behind this being is that the pacing feels different when you're doing 5 levels. It feels like there's a much bigger jump between 90 and 91, whereas if you're going through a 10 level leveling area, you're hitting levels much faster, because there are more of them. Even though the time from level, say in Northrend, the time from level 70 to 80 would have been roughly the same as it was from level 80 to 85 in Cataclysm. Obviously, when they came out later on, it was nerfed to compensate, but the actual leveling experience of a new expansion normally takes roughly the same sort of time, irrelevant of how many levels it is. But it's a mental thing, hitting new numbers quicker makes you feel like you're leveling faster, and it makes the leveling experience more enjoyable because you feel like you're making progress. Whereas if it's from 90 to 91 and you see you've got like 40 million experience that you've got to get, it's like, oh god. But if it's shorter, if it's broken up into more levels, it feels better, and I can see their reasoning behind that. Obviously, the problem being is they want to add more rewards for that leveling experience, and so the way they're doing it is, instead of adding new abilities as you level up, you're just getting one talent at level 100, and you're getting slight buffs to your certain abilities as you level up. So, like I think they said one of the mages would get increased damage on one of its fire spells or something like that. I can't remember. They're not all set in stone yet, but certain abilities will just get buffs as you level. There's a lot of stat changes in terms of armour and gear. The Item Squish is going on, so this was talked about in a few interviews a while ago, and devs basically said that the numbers for boss health and damage is just getting too ridiculously huge, and their coding is having trouble handling it. And so either they had two choices. It was either rewrite the code so it can handle bigger numbers, or do an item squish the damage and health of all the bosses of the latest content down and everything else in the past to compensate. They opted for that, which I'm mixed feelings about. I can see why they've done it, and I'll get used to it, but I don't know, I kind of like, part of leveling up for me is seeing those bigger numbers coming out and seeing that I'm actually more powerful, you know, when you like, compared to the beginning of the expansion, like seeing, you know, doing like 30k damage or whatever, and now being able to do 200, you know, 300, 400 plus, that I feel more powerful seeing those numbers, and you see the change visually. It's not just a case of that mob's going down faster, and I think that again is another mental, subconscious thing, that, you know, seeing the numbers get bigger makes you feel like you've actually grown through leveling, you've become more powerful. And so by resetting everything, it kind of, I don't know, it feels like a step back a little bit, but as I say, I can see the technical reasons behind it, and I probably would get a little bit tired eventually, because, I mean, you're going to end up with bosses like with 5 billion health, 6 billion health, people doing a million, 1.5 million plus DPS, and when the numbers get so big, it gets a little harder to keep track of everything, where it's like, if you're doing about 3000 DPS, then you can see, oh, I'm doing an extra 250 DPS, and I don't know, it's a little bit more manageable. What it does mean is the damage and health increase as you level up will be a lot smoother, a lot less gradient. So it'll be interesting to see how that works out, and it will be especially interesting to see how it works out when we're going back and soloing old content. Next expansion, I'm hoping to be able to go back and solo, you know, Madness of Deathwing and all the Cataclysm raids, because I got in at the end of Cataclysm, so I didn't get to do a lot of those raids. I did Dragon Soul a few times, but I didn't get to do Firelands and stuff like that. I'm interested in going back and doing that just for the achievements and for the transmog gear and whatnot. So obviously with the new expansion, I should have a high enough item level for people to do that, and it'll be interesting to see, you know, how it scales those old raids. The other thing is with stats, they're getting rid of hit and expertise, they're getting rid of reforging, and so they're majorly changing up how people approach stats on gear. Because you won't be able to reforge now, it's a case of you're going to have to look for the gear that has the right stats for you. You know, hit and reforge, hit and expertise aren't going to be a problem, which makes sense, you know. If you've spent all that time levelling up your character, if your character's been through, you know, Outland, it's been through Northrend, it's fought the Lich King, it's fought Deathwing and the Cataclysm Zone, it's gone through Pandaria, and there's still a chance you might miss things. It's like, maybe I'm like trained enough to be able to like not miss, and because I'm a trained warrior in this game. But I'm glad they're getting rid of that. I didn't really like reforging. It's just a chore. Like, I get a new piece of gear, and it's like, yeah, now I have to reforge everything to make sure I've met hit and expertise, and I'm notoriously bad at keeping track of things. The other day, one of my guild mates turned around and said to me, yeah, you need to reforge everything. You've got mastery on all your gear. And it was because the last couple of raids I've got like 3 or 4 pieces of gear per raid. So I've just been really rubbish keeping track of things, and I had to like reforge everything. I'm good at gemming up. I gem up straight away. It's just reforging I'm rubbish with. So I'm glad they're getting rid of that. But it does mean that you're going to have to look at particular items more, because they're adding tertiary stats to gear. So you'll get stuff like Avoidance and Leech, which will, you know, suck health from enemies as you do damage. So, you know, you might get a piece of gear drop that doesn't have one stat on it, one tertiary stat, and then you might get the same piece of gear later on that does have that stat on it. And so, and also like gear one will actually change depending on what spec you are. So when plate drops, it will just be plate. It won't be intellect plate, it won't be strength plate. It will change depending on what class, what spec you are. So you will only need one set of armour. except for the tertiary stats. Because if you think about it, a plate piece of armour will have avoidance. It might have avoidance on, which is obviously going to be good for tanks. And I don't believe that stat changes if you change spec. So you'll still have avoidance on if you're a DPS spec or if you're a healer spec. And you don't need that. So if you've got a DPS class that wears plate and a tank class that wears plate and a tank item drops that has avoidance on, even though both specs can use it and the stats will change, the tertiary stats I don't believe will. So the tank will obviously want the armour that has avoidance on and life leeching or whatever it's called as well. And there are certain other stats that are better for certain gear. And this was very much the case with old like vanilla and I think Burning Crusade as well, is that a lot of gear has stuff like nature resistance and fire damage, frost damage and stuff like that, and I think they're taking it back to that old school way. Like there were certain bosses in the old like vanilla that you couldn't kill unless you had certain stats on your armour. So you had to go out and get specific armour to fight one boss. You couldn't do it if you didn't have like fire resistance, you couldn't do it if you didn't have this extra damage or whatever. So it's going to be focusing more on that than just, well, my class uses mastery, this has mastery, done. So it's more versatile, but also in other ways you're going to have to pay a bit more attention to whether it works for your class in terms of the extra bonuses those things have. I'm interested to see how it works in terms of interchangeability in terms of like armor sets, because currently you have like every raid has a different set. You know, you have a hunter set, you have a mage set, you have a shaman set. You know, if it's a male set, are they going to still have different looks for each sort of, you know, style? Does it, like, am I now going to be able to use like multiple different male sets because there's certain, because I couldn't use the shaman transmog sets because, you know, they interchange. It's the transmog changes will be interesting because, you know, you'll be able to hopefully use more pieces from other sets because they won't be class restricted, but we'll have to see. Legendaries are going to come back. There's probably going to be a legendary quest line similar to the one in Pandaria, but also a more difficult, more isolated legendary quest line similar to ones in previous expansions. I'm hoping it's still available to everyone, but it'll probably just be a little bit more difficult. I'm hoping for weapons this time round, because I was kind of hoping for weapons in Pandaria, so when we got cloaks I was kind of like, I would have liked to call bow or something. Biggest thing probably is garrisons. Garrisons are essentially the WoW version of player housing, and player housing has been rumoured for a long time. It was actually intended to come out with vanilla, but they pulled it during beta or alpha, I believe, and it never made it in. But with Pandaria, there's been more use of phasing technology, and so player housing has become more possible with this new technology, and they're actually finally bringing it out in Warlords of Draenor. You'll get to choose between multiple areas in each zone, and you'll be able to upgrade your garrisons, and people will drop by like NPCs, and you can bring those NPCs into your sort of an NPC dungeon group. But you can send those NPCs out to go and do dungeons and raids, and supposedly they can go back and do an old raid and get the transmog gear for you. But the difficulty, like dungeons, are going to take less time to do than raids, whereas a raid might take a few days for a group of NPCs to do. So I think that's pretty cool. I'm interested to see how that works, because I like the idea of building a little town and having, like, it's kind of Sims, I suppose. I never really liked Sims, but I like the idea behind having all these people come into your town, and you'll have people that like tanks, people like healers. Obviously, like I said, they aren't players, they're NPCs, but they have their own stats, and like pets, they have different qualities as well. You're going to get some that are stronger than others, and there'll be all sorts coming in, and you'll be able to upgrade your town with new buildings, and you'll be able to access professions you wouldn't normally be able to access through your NPCs that you bring in. I think this is a really cool idea. I'm just worried that it'll be something that you spend all this time building up, and then the expansion after Warlords of Draenor comes around, and you leave the place, and all those NPCs that you've like worked with, and that whole town that you built up is you're never going to go back to it, because there'll be a new capital city to go to, or there'll be a new housing area. And I would prefer it if they somehow made it carry on into the next expansion, so it feels like somewhere you can always go back to. I'm also hoping that sometime they make guild housing, so you can actually build a guild sort of like a guild area, like a guild house, you know, like a club, you know, and that would be kind of cool. And you could like have statues of particular guild members that have done really well, or I know one thing they're doing in garrisons is that you'll be able to like mount the heads of bosses you've recently killed or something. I think that's a really cool idea, and I think that's something that would really be awesome in guild housing. So yeah, I think garrisons are going to be awesome, but I think they're going to be like the starting point for something better, and I'm hoping that's guild housing. So yeah, there's a lot of quality of life changes, like they're clearing up bag space. There's going to be an adventurer's guide, which will teach you, you know, say you're questing, you're not sure where to go. The adventurer's guide will say, well, why don't you go and try this? Or even post level cap, it will tell you, well, you could go back and do this dungeon and get this mount or something like that. It will give you recommendations of things to do, which I think is a great idea. Obviously, you know, I tend to use MMO Champion and Wowhead and Wowpedia and WoWWiki and stuff like that to go back and see, you know, old gear that I wouldn't mind getting and things like that. But I think this is cool if people perhaps aren't so industrious in their research, and they just want something in-game to prompt them to tell you to do things. So that's one thing that's been added. Probably one of the most controversial things, and I'm not going to go over this too much, but is the change to raiding. Basically, they're completely mixing up how raiding is. Currently, obviously, you've got different lockouts: 10, 25 man, normal and heroic. You've got flex, which is 10 to 25, and you've got LFR, which is 25, but more often than not less than that. They're adding the flex technology to LFR normal, and they're making it so that the current flex mode, because obviously, you know, the current flex mode will be made redundant because both normal and LFR will have the same technology, but they still want to keep that difficulty in there for people who want to step up from LFR. So the current flex mode will now be called normal, and it will you know, still step up from LFR, and it makes sense because it's like not super challenging, but it's like an entry point. It's your basic level, and LFR is just, you know, quick running. I just need the loot. You don't think about it too much. Current normal mode will become heroic, and that will have flex technology as well as LFR. So, you know, with LFR, quite often you'll have a tank leave when they don't need the last boss, and you have to wait for ages, or you have healers leave, DPS leave, and it'll be great because you can still carry on. It'll scale the bosses according to who leaves. So you'll be able to get LFR done faster, which is great because LFR is too much time for the amount of anguish that you have to go through. And with normal, it means that you don't have to keep standbys out all the time, because if you've got somebody who's a standby and they're around and maybe they can't raid much, but you know, and you're saying, well, we've got everyone here this week and that's the 1 week that they're available, you don't have to kick them out. You can say, well, you know, you can join us, we've got the full 10 that we need, and we've got, you know, we can have a few standbys as well. Personally, I think I prefer keeping my group at 10 man or that sort of realm, because I just like the intimacy of that sort of small group. You know, when it gets to sort of like 25 people, I find it just gets a bit messy, and I just prefer a 10 man sort of setup. So I'm hoping that my guild ends up keeping it around that. Maybe having a few people, like standbys coming in, means I can get geared up at the same pace. We won't have to worry about them being lower geared. You have someone that drops out of a raid, you need to get a standby in. If in the current way of things, if you have everyone turn up normally and this is the one day that someone can't turn up, that person who's a standby is going to be majorly under-geared, and if you're trying to progress on later bosses, they're actually just going to be like a dead weight. They're not going to do enough DPS, they're going to take too much damage, so being able to bring them in anytime is great because it means they're still going to get geared up, so if they are a standby, you don't have to worry about them being a liability. So yeah, that I think is great. The flexibility of those three is awesome. I'm glad they're adding that in. The flex technology is just brilliant. I think it's really it's made people move from LFR into flex, and I think it will bring even more people into it'll just bring more people into normal, or what's going to be heroic, because you won't have to keep people on standby. You won't have to worry about just keeping your little group. If you're a 10-man, you can say, well, you know, we've got room for 2 or 3 more people, so if you guys want to come along, obviously, you know, they need to prove themselves, but that goes without saying. But where that doesn't apply is the new heroic mode. Obviously, because normal is going to become heroic, you need something above that, and the new heroic mode will be called mythic. I actually kind of predicted this because I said that they should add a new difficulty and call it mythic and have it for like really hardcore raiders. And while this will be the same difficulty as a current heroic, it will be 20-man. And the reason for that being is that it's very difficult to like tweak a raid to work perfectly at 10 and 25-man at heroic level, because certain mechanics you're restricted in terms of what you can do. They won't scale properly from 25 to 10-man, and so there are certain bosses that are harder on one difficulty and easier on another. You know, in 25-man you can have a wide range of classes, so there are certain mechanics you can go, right, we can have a druid to deal with that class, whereas on normal you're going to have a much smaller group and you're going to have a smaller pool of players there. You might have like 3 hunters or 3 paladins, and so you're going to be missing abilities, and so certain bosses might be a bit trickier. The fact they're making it 20-man basically frees developers up to go a little bit more crazy with what mechanics they add in on heroic difficulty, and so you will get a better raiding experience. The only problem is for guilds like mine, say we blast through normal mode and we start looking towards doing heroic, we're not going to be able to do that because my server's pretty small and we just won't be able to find another 10 players, and it's not, at the moment I don't believe it's cross realm either, so it would have to be 10 players from our realm, and there's no way we're going to be able to find those players, so we will not essentially be able to do mythic mode. As simple as that. We have enough trouble getting 10 players for normal. So mythic mode's it's probably going to be out of the question for us next expansion. And it's not like we end up really progressing through heroic anyway, but it's nice to do. You know, if you manage to finish a raid before, like clear it before the end of that patch, it's nice to go back and go through and try them on heroic, but let's say we're not going to be able to do that, so it's a pain for us, and it's a pain for 10-man heroic guilds that now have to find another 10 players, whereas 25-mans could just downscale by 5 and trim off the dead weight, as it were. 10-mans have got to find 10 players who are committed enough to get world firsts, if they're like hardcore raiding guilds. So yeah, that's a bit controversial to heroic raiders. It doesn't really affect me, but it would be nice to be able to do heroic if we cleared the normal level. But hey, the other thing is every single account that upgrades to Warlords of Draenor will be able to get a free level 90 character, and the reason behind this is because it's aiming at bringing players back and bringing them up to date, because with every expansion that comes out it adds more leveling, and no one wants to level through all of that again. I mean, well, I say no one, there are people that love leveling characters, so I'm wrong there, but personally I've levelled 4 90s now. I've got a hunter, a death knight, a monk and a shaman, and I would like a warlock, but I'm not going to level one. I'm just not. I've got a warlock with heirlooms and it's sitting in an inn getting shit tons of rested bonus, but I'm just not going to go back and level that. Not this expansion anyway. Maybe down the line I might, but with this, I won't need to, because I'll just boost that Warlock up to 90, and it gives people an opportunity. If you've got a few alts already, and you're at that point like me, that you don't really want to level another, this gives you basically a free ult, a free level 90 that you can go, right, I've leveled these characters, but I've not tried that class before, I'll boost that one up and give it a go, and you never know, you might prefer it. And I'm looking forward to trying Warlocks. I'm going to level up an Orc Warlock and give that a go. I've played them like as I've leveled, like I think I've got a Warlock at like level 11 and that's it, but I'm looking forward to trying one for propers, as it were. I think that's about it. I mean, obviously there's loads of other little things. Oh shit, son, how could I forget this? Probably the biggest of all the additions. New character models. As I'm not going to brag, I kind of predicted this as well. I said that they'd probably bring out all of the character models next expansion instead of a new race or class, and lo and behold, we are not getting a new race or class. We're getting the original 8 character races plus the Draenor and the Blood Elf updated. We've already seen pictures of a few of them. I'll put a few of them in now. We've already seen the Gnome, Dwarf, the Tauren, the Orc, and the Undead. They're all varying stages of development. It looks like the Orc and the Dwarf and the Gnome are essentially done, at least in terms of the male models. It looks like the female Dwarf has pretty much just been finished. The female Gnome is pretty much done. I've not seen the female Orc yet. The male Tauren model has just been finished, so I'm assuming that's now going through like animations, and they'll be designing the alternate customization options. And the Undead, I think they've just finished the model for that as well. So, and they're working on all the other ones. The intention is that they're going to have them all in Warlords of Draenor, so we're not going to have to wait over multiple expansions for all these models to be done, which is awesome, because I was worried that we're going to have to that we were going to get just dwarves and Orcs next expansion, have to wait until the next one to get any more. But I mean, a few months ago they said they were like 12% done on all the character models, and it seems like they've done a hell of a lot of work in that time. So it looks like they're, I mean, assuming even if we get Warlords of Draenor earlier than normal, like mid next year, it looks like we're still going to get a few of the races at launch at least. I'm guessing we'll probably get like 4. But they may even get all of them done. I don't know, it depends whether they hit any issues, but so far they seem to be doing a hell of a lot of work and getting them done, and they look like they keep the original spirit of the original character models, which I'm glad, because, you know, I've only been playing like 2-ish years now, and I've got attached to my character, and I don't want it to change too much, but I also do want it to look better. So I think keeping the original character models in mind is a good idea. I know there are a lot of people that wanted upright orcs instead of the hunched over ones we've got now. Looking at them, I think the new ones actually look a little more hunched over. The head is a little bit lower down. So I guess people aren't going to be happy with that. A lot of people wanted the Thrall sort of style ones. The undead look awesome though. I'm tempted to make an undead warlock, but I'm not sure. I hate gnomes. I really hate gnomes. Like, I have a deep-seated hatred of them. If I'm in a battleground and there's a gnome, that's dying. But the female gnome looks really cute, I'm not gonna lie. I could almost bring myself to play one if I made an alliance character. The dwarves look fucking awesome. They look like the vehicle from Northrend, just like those huge, massive beards and quite tough-looking faces. So yeah, those are really cool. The Tauren look awesome. They look a lot softer, less monstrous than the old model, which I think the old model is actually one of the ugliest of all the races. But yeah, the Orc I'm loving the most at the moment. They just look so like creepy looking and scary, whereas the old Orc kind of looks a bit duh. Especially when they run, they look a little bit special. But otherwise, they're all looking super awesome, and I can't wait to see the rest of the character models, in particular trolls, because I'm obviously a huge fan of those. But yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Obviously we're getting new raids, new dungeons. Apparently they're going to plan to add more dungeons mid-expansion, which is kind of cool. There'll be new scenarios. The leveling experience is supposed to be a little bit brisker. They said that the focus on grinding through levels is less important nowadays, and they just want to make it so the leveling experience is, in their words, a fun, quick romp through the leveling zones. So the experience will be there, and the quality storyline and whatnot, but it won't be so focused on like just grinding through it. So I think it'll be much quicker leveling up in Warlords of Draenor, which I'm glad, because it'll mean hopefully it's a little bit more alt friendly, which Mists of Pandaria really wasn't. Yeah, as I say, it looks gorgeous. The trailer is just amazing. I'm looking forward to the proper cinematic trailer when that comes out. I'll make sure I keep you guys up to date on any new content that comes out. I'm sorry I've not really mentioned PvP in this video because I'm not a big PvP player, but there is a new PvP zone that's going to be always active instead of Winter Grasp, which is at set times, so that should be cool. It's something cool to drop into every once in a while. Yep, that's it. So I'm excited for all this stuff. I think Warlords of Draenor I'm more excited for than I was Mists of Pandaria, and I was pretty stoked for Mists of Pandaria. I know a lot of people, as soon as they saw pandas, were like, what the fuck? What is this game? This isn't World of Warcraft. But I love it. I think that the basic principles behind Mists of Pandaria are really important and worth adding into the overall Warcraft storyline. And I think I'm going to do a review of Mists of Pandaria overall, looking back on it soon. But I'm going to wait until I kill Grosh Hellscream on normal mode, and my guild is currently on Siegecrafter Blackfuse, so hopefully, you know, at a push we might be able to kill him before Christmas. At the rate my guild tends to progress. So once we have killed him, I'll do a video looking back on Pandaria, looking back at some of the things that I think were done well, some of the things I think could have done better and stuff. And yeah, it will just be a whole review video, and that'll probably be like January, so it's not going to be for a while. But yeah, I hope you've liked the video, and I hope you're as excited for Warlords of Draenor as I am. I think it's going to be a great expansion, and yeah, so cheers for watching. I've got more videos coming up, so keep an eye out. Cheers if you like, subscribe, you know, do all those things. I'm not going to force you to do shit. I appreciate any support you guys can give and any critiques, as long as they're nice, you know. Well, not nice, but not horrible. If you're going to just call me a dick and just be mean, then I won't respond to them, but if it's constructive criticism, I'm always open to it. So yeah, thank you for watching, hope you guys enjoyed the vid, and I will chat to you guys soon. Cheers.